Welcome back to Black Joy Interrupted, where we pull back the curtain on the stories that make you stop and say, what? Wait, that really happened? If you haven't already, go ahead and like this video and share it with someone who values honest conversations about justice and truth. I promise you it's worth that. Like and share, and it's free. Now, picture this. It's just a few days before Christmas. You've promised your grandson a movie date, popcorn, laughter, that little bit of peace we all try to grab before the holidays hit full swing. You're sitting in the theater, the previews are rolling, when your phone buzzes. A text says your car's been hit in the parking lot. You step outside worried and wanting to know what's going on. But instead of a dented bumper, you're met by flashing lights, deputies waiting, hands on their belts, faces cold. They call your name, and before you can even process what's happening, they tell you you're under arrest. You ask why. They say elder abuse. You laugh at first. Elder abuse? You do live with your elderly mother, but you think it's a mistake, a bad prank maybe. But their tone changes and you realize this is real. The next thing you know, you're in handcuffs. Your grandson is crying and your whole world feels upside down. Hours turn into days. You're fingerprinted, strip searched, transferred from one jail to another. Nobody listens when you say they've got the wrong person. You just keep thinking, how could this happen?
I said, I'm being punked. And so she was like, no, ma'am, you're not being punked. You're under arrest. I knew they had the wrong person, but it's like, how am I gonna prove it? This is a record that won't disappear. It's gonna follow me the rest of my life.
Sitting in that cell, you finally see the paperwork. The woman they're looking for? From Kentucky, 6 years younger. And get this, she spells her name differently. That's when it hits you. You're living someone else's nightmare, and the people who put you there don't even realize it. The woman's story we're sharing with you is Nickie Sledge. She's a 49-year-old grandmother from Georgia who was arrested for crimes committed by a completely different woman with a similar yet different enough name and appearance. And nobody, not one officer, not one deputy, not one jail official, stopped long enough to notice the most obvious difference of all. She wasn't even white. Her attorney, civil rights lawyer Harry Daniels, says what happened wasn't a simple mix-up. It was either gross negligence or deliberate disregard. Because after a full investigation, a signed warrant, 2 strip searches, and multiple days in custody, no one noticed they had the wrong woman.
We're going to bring a claim or a civil suit, whatever that may be, because somebody has to answer for what happened here.
That's not a glitch in the system. It's the system working exactly as it was built, to ignore Black innocence altogether. That's why the outrage isn't just about Nickie's 3 days behind bars. It's about what it says to every Black person in America, that your freedom can vanish because someone else couldn't be bothered to look up from a piece of paper. That's not law enforcement. That's negligence protected by a badge. Let's talk about what really happened here, because this isn't just a mix-up. This is what happens when law enforcement treats diligence like a luxury instead of a duty. They didn't just arrest the wrong woman, they arrested a Black grandmother in front of her 5-year-old grandson, humiliated her, strip searched her twice, and tossed her through a system that couldn't even pause long enough to notice she was the wrong race. Let's sit with that. The wrong race. A warrant for a white woman from Kentucky somehow led to a Black woman in Georgia spending 3 days behind bars. That's not human error, that's institutional rot. And we've seen this before. Back in 1980, a Black woman named Joyce Ann Brown spent almost 10 years in prison for a crime she didn't commit because another woman with the same name signed into a motel. The police didn't investigate. They didn't cross-check photos, fingerprints, or alibis. They just saw a name and decided the case was closed. It took a decade and national pressure to expose that the real suspect had literally stolen her name. And now, decades later, we're watching the same script play out again. It's the same laziness, the same disregard for facts, and the same blind comfort with locking up Black women first and asking questions later. So what should happen now? First, accountability. The Cherokee County Sheriff's Office and Rockdale County deputies owe the public more than a press release. They owe a televised apology, not just to Mrs. Sledge, but to every Black person who has to wonder if they're next. We don't need "we're reviewing the situation." We need "we were wrong and here's what we're doing to make sure it never happens again." Second, her attorneys should go hard on constitutional violations. Her Fourth Amendment right against illegal seizure, they had no probable cause once race, age, and identity didn't match. her 14th Amendment right of being denied equal protection because no white suspect would have been mistaken for a black grandmother and dragged across 2 counties without question. And then there's the cop's negligence, which led to her deprivation of liberty under Section 1983. That's the federal path to damages when police misconduct strips you of your freedom. And they shouldn't stop there. The false imprisonment, the emotional distress, and the trauma to her grandson must be part of that suit. Because this wasn't just about her arrest, it was about her family's terror, her dignity, and her name. Let's be clear, this could have ended differently. A startled officer, a sudden movement, a misread gesture. We've buried people for less. The system that jailed her is the same one that kills people who look like her, because it refuses to see the difference between suspicion and identity, and between enforcement and humanity. Mrs. Sledge deserves more than a settlement. She deserves public vindication on the same platforms that humiliated her. The department must stand before the cameras, admit their failure, and show the Black community that they understand what they broke. Trust. And until that happens, this story isn't over. Because justice denied is still justice delayed. And delay, when it comes to Black lives, has always been the system's favorite form of denial. Because here's the truth. Every time something like this happens, it chips away at the fragile peace we try to build. Black joy shouldn't have to survive the trauma of wrongful arrests, mistaken identity, or institutional neglect. It shouldn't have to fight this hard to exist. Mrs. Sledge's story isn't an isolated event. It's a mirror. A reflection of what happens when our humanity is treated like a paperwork error and when accountability becomes optional. We can't afford to look away, not when history keeps repeating itself with new names and the same excuses. If this story struck a nerve, don't just watch, respond. Hit that like button, subscribe so you don't miss the next breakdown, and share this video so more people can get in on the conversation and are exposed to the many ways justice is denied and Black joy is interrupted. And if you want to hear more about the story of Joyce Ann Brown, the woman who fought the same battle decades before Nickie Sledge, drop JB in the comments and we'll make sure her story gets told. You've been watching Black Joy Interrupted, where we don't just report what happened, we break down the failures that made it possible, because our peace, our joy, and our dignity deserve protection too.